It's 2 in the morning in California's Central Valley, and a machine the size of a house is shaking grapevines hard enough that ripe fruit rains onto a conveyor belt. This happens on farm after farm, all night, for 4 months straight. Millions of tons of grapes, harvested and pushed through an industrial system most people never see. Today, we're following that fruit from the vine to the bottle. Picture the landscape first. Vineyards stretch from the Oregon border almost to Mexico, climbing hillsides in Napa, running flat and endless across the San Joaquin Valley floor, tucked into fog-cooled canyons along the coast. This isn't a handful of postcard wineries. It's a working landscape the size of a small country, and nearly every acre of it is racing the same invisible clock, on a schedule that doesn't bend for anyone. Fly over it and the pattern becomes obvious. Mile after mile of vines planted in tight, disciplined rows, trellised on wire, running up hillsides too steep for almost any other crop. Some blocks sit close enough to the ocean that you can see fog still clinging to the lower rows at midday. Others sit so far inland that heat shimmers visibly off the dirt between them by mid-morning. 2 vineyards can be a 5-hour drive apart and still be racing toward the exact same harvest deadline, shaped by completely different weather, completely different soil, aiming at the exact same finish line. That clock is set by the fruit itself. Weeks before a single grape is picked, vineyard crews walk the rows carrying small handheld devices, crushing a berry against the lens and checking the sugar reading, a number growers call bricks. They're watching it climb day by day, waiting for the exact window where sugar and acid are in balance. Pick too early, and the wine comes out thin and sharp. Wait too long, and the sugar spikes while the acid that gives wine its freshness quietly disappears. Somewhere in a span of just a few days, for every single block of vines, someone has to make the call. It is the single most consequential decision of the entire year, made not once, but thousands of times, across a landscape too large for any one person to walk. There's no instrument that makes this decision automatically. A vineyard manager will taste the fruit off the vine, biting into a berry, feeling the skin, checking whether the seeds have turned from green to brown, because a brown seed means the tannins inside have finally ripened too. Sugar readings tell only part of the story. The rest is judgment built over years of walking the same rows, watching the same vines respond to the same hillside, season after season. Getting to this point took the better part of a year. Long before harvest, crews spent the winter pruning each vine back to a handful of bare canes, shaping the plant so it can only put its energy into a manageable amount of fruit instead of spreading itself thin across dozens of unruly shoots. Come spring, that same crew is back in the rows, pulling leaves away from the developing clusters, opening them up to sunlight and airflow so mildew doesn't take hold in the humid months ahead. By the time a single grape is ready to be picked, it's already the product of months of quiet, repetitive labor most people watching the harvest footage will never see. The picking doesn't happen all at once. The whites come off first. Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, the delicate grapes destined for crisp, cool wines and sparkling blends. Weeks later, the thicker-skinned reds follow. Cabernet Sauvignon, Zinfandel, Syrah. In the cooler pockets along the coast, some blocks won't be ready until November, even as the hot valley floor has already finished and moved on. The result is a harvest that doesn't arrive in a single wave. It rolls across the state for 4 straight months, south to north, valley to mountain, never quite stopping. A crew that finishes stripping a Central Valley block in July might still be picking a coastal hillside in November, 4 months and hundreds of miles apart, working the same harvest. At this scale, hands alone can't do it. A mechanical harvester rolls down each row like a tunnel on wheels, straddling the vines. Inside, rows of flexible rods shake the plants hard enough that ripe berries fall loose while the stems stay put. A violent, rhythmic vibration tuned specifically to strip fruit without stripping the vine. Fans inside the machine blast away loose leaves and stray debris before the fruit ever touches a belt. What's left drops cleanly into steel bins riding alongside. One of these machines can clear an acre in under an hour, work that would otherwise take a crew of 30 people half a day. Watch one work up close and the choreography becomes obvious. The rods shake in a tight, fast pattern timed almost like a drum beat. Berries fall in a steady rain onto a catching pan below. A belt carries them upward, past the fans and into the waiting bin, while the vine itself, leaves, wood, the structure that will produce next year's crop, stays rooted in the ground, barely disturbed. It's aggressive and precise at the same time, built to take exactly what it needs and leave everything else standing. Much of this happens after dark. Run the harvesters at night, and the fruit comes in cooler, less prone to oxidizing, easier on the wine before it's even reached a tank. So through the peak of harvest season, a Central Valley vineyard at midnight looks less like farmland and more like a construction site. Headlights sweeping down the rows, engines running, the machine working steadily while the rest of the world sleeps. Drive along a rural highway in September and you'll pass vineyard after vineyard lit up like this, each one running its own machine on its own schedule, all working toward the same crush pad deadline. And it doesn't stop. Bin after bin, truck after truck, moving out of the vineyards and onto the highway toward the crush pad. All night, every night, for months. Some of the busiest grape-growing counties in the state will see truck after truck rolling in past midnight, each one carrying several tons of fruit that has to be processed within hours, not days, before its quality starts to slip. Behind the scenes, someone is choreographing all of it. Vineyard managers and winery logistics teams are on the phone constantly during peak harvest, deciding which block gets picked tonight, which truck route is fastest, which crush pad has open capacity to receive the next load. A single delay, a broken down harvester, a truck stuck behind an accident, can knock an entire night's schedule out of order, and with grapes this perishable, there's rarely room to simply pick up the slack tomorrow. The harvest looks chaotic from the outside. From the inside, it runs on a plan revised almost hourly. Every one of those bins is racing a clock of its own. From the second a grape is cut from the vine, sugar and acid start drifting away from where the winemaker wants them. So what happens in the next few hours decides whether that fruit becomes something worth drinking. And what happens next is where this stops looking like farming at all and starts looking like an assembly line. Everything from here happens behind walls most visitors never get past. Scales, presses, tanks, all moving at a pace built to catch those few hours of perfect balance before they're gone. The trucks pull into the winery's scale house, where every load is weighed and sampled before it goes anywhere else. A technician pulls a handful of berries, crushes them, and checks the same sugar and acid readings the vineyard crew was tracking weeks earlier. Except now the numbers determine exactly what happens to that fruit inside the building. This data gets radioed straight to the winemaking team, who use it to decide which tank the load goes into, what yeast strain to use, and how the fermentation schedule needs to shift to accommodate it. From there, the fruit moves straight to the crush pad. Inside a long, perforated steel cylinder, rotating paddles do in seconds what would once have taken a full crew with baskets and bare feet. They split the grape skins open and strip the stems away in a single continuous pass. What comes out the other end is a thick, fragrant slurry of juice, skins, seeds and pulp, called must. The smell alone changes the moment it hits open air. Sweet, slightly fermented already, filling the entire crush pad. For white wine, that mixture goes straight to a press, because the winemaker wants only the clear juice, none of the color. For red wine, everything stays together, skins included, because the deep color and structure of a red wine doesn't come from the juice at all. It comes from the skins steeping in it, like tea. That single choice, made within minutes of the truck arriving, is one of the most consequential in the entire winemaking process. Stand on the crush pad during peak harvest, and the scale of it is almost overwhelming. Trucks idle in a loose line, waiting their turn to dump their bins. Forklifts move steadily back and forth, lifting emptied bins out of the way to make room for the next load. Juice and must move constantly through open channels and hoses, and the whole area smells less like fruit and more like the inside of a working brewery. Sweet, yeasty, faintly sharp. It runs like this for hours at a stretch, slows briefly before dawn, then picks right back up again as the next night's trucks start arriving. The presses used for white wine are almost gentle by industrial standards, an inflatable rubber bladder inside a perforated cylinder, squeezing the juice free without ever cracking a seed, because a cracked seed releases bitterness no winemaker wants in the glass. The first juice to run free, before any real pressure is applied, is the prized fraction, cleaner, brighter, saved separately from everything pressed after it. For red wine, this same press comes into play much later, only after fermentation has already stripped the skins of their color and flavor. From there, the juice or must moves into rows of gleaming stainless steel tanks, some standing 30 feet tall, fitted with cooling jackets that keep each one at a precise temperature around the clock. This tank farm, more than anything, is the signature image of a large California winery. Rank after rank of steel cylinders under bright work lights, running non-stop through the length of harvest, catwalks strung between them so technicians can climb up and check each one. Yeast goes in next, and the transformation begins. Over the following 1 to 5 weeks, that yeast will consume the sugar in the juice and convert it into alcohol, releasing carbon dioxide as it works. Enough gas, in a large tank, that the surface visibly churns and bubbles like something at a rolling boil. White wines ferment cold, just above cellar temperature, to protect the delicate aromatics that make a Sauvignon Blanc smell the way it does. Reds ferment noticeably warmer, because heat helps pull color and structure out of the skins. Keeping all of this on target takes constant intervention. Each tank is wrapped in a jacket of circulating coolant, wired to a digital control panel that a technician checks and adjusts throughout the day, nudging the temperature up if fermentation is sluggish, pulling it back down if things are running hot, and threatening to stall the yeast altogether. Walk through a fermentation room during peak harvest, and you'll hear it before you see it. A low mechanical hum of pumps and compressors, layered under the occasional hiss of released gas. The building itself working almost as hard as the wine inside it. That heat creates a problem of its own. As fermentation runs, carbon dioxide pushes the grape skins up to the surface of the tank, where they pack together into a thick, dense cap, sometimes several feet deep, solid enough that a person could almost stand on it. Left alone, that cap would dry out and spoil. So winemakers manage it constantly, either pumping juice up from the bottom of the tank and showering it back over the top in a wide, splashing arc, or physically punching the cap back down into the liquid with long metal tools. At a large winery during harvest, this happens on a rolling schedule, tank after tank, hour after hour, day and night, hoses dragged from one tank to the next, pumps cycling on and off across the entire facility. Many wines, nearly all reds, go through a second, quieter transformation after that. Bacteria convert a sharp, green apple-like acid in the wine into a softer, rounder one, smoothing out the wine's texture. For some California Chardonnays, winemakers choose this step deliberately to build a fuller mouthfeel. For reds, it's close to universal, running quietly alongside the last stretch of primary fermentation. This stage doesn't announce itself the way primary fermentation does. There's no visible cap, no churning surface, no burst of activity to point a camera at. Just a faint, buttery smell that starts to drift through the cellar as the bacteria work. A smell winemakers learn to recognize almost by instinct after a few harvests. A winemaker walking the tank room at night can often tell which tanks have finished this conversion just by breathing in as they pass, long before a lab result confirms it. It's one of the few parts of the entire process that still depends more on a trained nose than on any gauge or readout. Not every wine goes through it, though. Winemakers chasing a crisp, high-acid style, many Sauvignon Blancs, some lighter rosés, deliberately block this conversion, keeping the sharper acid intact because that brightness is exactly the character they're trying to preserve. It's a reminder that almost nothing in this process happens by default. Every stage, even one this quiet, is a choice made with a specific bottle of finished wine already in mind. What's happening inside those tanks, across those weeks, is chemistry no machine could replicate on its own. Yeast populations exploding from a starting culture into billions of cells, alcohol climbing from nothing to well over 10%, raw grape juice slowly becoming something else entirely. It's easy to walk past a row of steel tanks and see only machinery. What's actually inside is alive and changing by the hour. Once fermentation finishes, the wine is drawn off the sediment that's settled at the bottom of the tank, dead yeast cells and grape solids, collectively known as lees. Leave the wine sitting on that sediment too long and it picks up off flavors. Leave it briefly and it can pick up welcome texture instead. The winemaker decides how long is enough, tasting through the tank day by day until the balance feels right. Next comes fining. A fine clay is stirred into the wine and left to settle, slowly binding to the microscopic proteins still suspended in the liquid and dragging them down with it as it sinks toward the bottom of the tank, like slow falling snow. Once it's fully settled, the clarified wine is drawn off again, leaving the sediment behind. a step aimed at preventing the wine from ever clouding up once it's sitting on a shelf months later. Then filtration. Some wineries push the wine through thick pads of fine mineral powder to strip out anything larger. Others use a newer method, forcing the wine across a membrane so fine it filters out residual yeast and bacteria without stripping flavor or exposing the wine to extra oxygen along the way. Either way, the wine that comes out the other end is noticeably brighter and clearer than what went in, a visible transformation you could hold up to the light. It's a strange midpoint for the wine to be at. A few weeks earlier, it was cloudy grape juice, thick with skins and pulp. A few weeks from now, it will be something a person orders by name off a restaurant list. Right now, moving through steel pipes and membrane filters under fluorescent light, it doesn't look like either one, just a clear, pale liquid on its way somewhere. Its character mostly locked in, but not yet on display. Some of the wine, at this stage, goes into oak barrels to age, the same French and American oak that's shaped fine wine for centuries, stacked in rows inside cool, dim aging cellars. Before a barrel ever holds wine, a cooper has already shaped it by hand, bending the staves with heat and fire until they curve into that familiar rounded form, then charring the interior over an open flame to a level the winery specifically requested. Light, medium, or heavy toast, each one pulling a different flavor out of the same species of oak. As the finished wine sits inside, the wood slowly gives up compounds that add vanilla notes, structure, and a faint smokiness from that same charred interior. A portion of the wine simply evaporates through the porous wood over time. Winemakers call it the angel's share, the winemaker's loss, but also part of what concentrates the flavor left behind. At industrial scale, full barrel aging is expensive, so many large producers use long oak staves suspended inside steel tanks instead, or cycle barrels faster than a traditional cellar would. Wines meant to taste bright and fresh, most whites, most rosés, skip wood altogether and stay in steel from start to finish, preserving the fruit character the winemaker wants to keep front and center. Eventually, all of it comes together in the blend. Winemakers taste through dozens, sometimes hundreds, of individual tanks and barrels, mixing and adjusting until the final wine matches the flavor profile the brand is known for. A little more of this lot for structure, a little less of that one for balance, tasting and retasting until the blend clicks. Part science, part palate. This is where a winemaker's judgment shows up most directly in the glass. One last step remains before bottling. The wine is chilled down to near freezing and held there for several days, a process that forces natural tartrate crystals out of solution before they can form later, inside a sealed bottle on a store shelf, where a customer might mistake them for shattered glass. Then the bottling line, the point where the entire process becomes visibly, unmistakably industrial. Empty bottles stream in on a conveyor, pass under a bank of fill heads, and come out full in a matter of seconds, all while a blanket of inert gas protects the wine from oxidizing mid-fill. A single high-speed line can send thousands of bottles down the belt every hour, each one capped or corked, foiled, labeled, and boxed before it ever slows down. Watch the line from above and it looks almost hypnotic, bottles marching in tight formation, spinning briefly under the labeler, then vanishing into a case at the far end. The closure itself is a quiet, decades-long argument the industry still hasn't fully settled. Natural cork, harvested from the bark of cork oak trees grown mostly in Portugal and Spain, remains the standard for premium wine, letting in a whisper of oxygen over years of aging that helps the wine develop and soften. That cork is stripped by hand, in sheets, from trees that are never cut down. A single tree can be harvested this way over and over across a lifetime, its bark slowly regrowing between each stripping. Screw caps and synthetic closures, once seen as a shortcut, have become the standard for everyday wine, eliminating the risk of a moldy, ruined cork entirely and speeding the line up in the process. Either way, the closure snaps into place in a fraction of a second, the last physical decision made about the wine before it leaves the building. Labeling runs at the same relentless pace as the filler. Front label, back label, sometimes a neck label too, applied with mechanical precision as each bottle rolls past. Every label carries information the law requires: where the grapes came from, what's in the bottle, how strong it is, printed in massive runs long before harvest even begins, so the artwork is ready the moment the wine is. From there, finished cases move into a distribution system unlike almost any other consumer product in America. Winery to wholesaler, wholesaler to retailer, a three-tier structure written into law state by state, decades before anyone imagined a winery moving 50,000 tons of fruit in a single season. Pallet after pallet gets wrapped, loaded, and rolled onto trucks headed for warehouses across the country, the last physical step before that bottle ever reaches a shelf. But the story doesn't end at the loading dock. To understand why this system runs the way it does, you have to understand the land underneath it, because not every acre of American vineyard is playing the same game. The Central Valley is built for volume. The land is flat, hot, and irrigated, and the vines respond by loading up with fruit, heavy, high-yielding crops that feed the everyday, budget-friendly wine most Americans actually drink. Deep soil, abundant water pulled down from the Sierra snowpack, and a long stretch of reliable heat make this some of the most productive vineyard land on Earth, acre for acre. Head toward the coast, and the logic flips entirely. In Napa, Sonoma, the hills above Paso Robles, cool ocean fog rolls in through gaps in the coastal range almost every afternoon, slowing everything down. Vines here work harder for less fruit, but that slower ripening is exactly what gives a Napa Cabernet or a Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir the depth and complexity that commands a premium price. Same crusher, same tanks, same bottling line, but two entirely different products coming off the same industrial backbone, shaped almost entirely by geography and a few degrees of afternoon fog. The West Coast doesn't have a monopoly either. East of the Cascades, Washington's high desert grows serious Cabernet and Riesling across a stretch of land big enough to rival a small European wine country, its vines baking under intense summer sun and cooling sharply once night falls. Oregon's Willamette Valley, by contrast, has built an international reputation on Pinot Noir alone, its cool, wet climate suited almost perfectly to that one delicate grape. And wine production doesn't stop at the Rockies. New York's Finger Lakes turns out Riesling that competes on a world stage. Texas runs hundreds of licensed wineries across its hill country, and Virginia has quietly become a serious wine state in its own right. The infrastructure in this video, the harvesters, the tanks, the bottling lines, isn't concentrated in one valley. It's scattered across a continent, adapted to whatever climate it lands in. Step back far enough, and this stops looking like agriculture at all. It starts looking like a major American industry, one that touches glassmaking, cork production, label printing, trucking, tourism, retail, in all 50 states. Wine country alone pulls in tens of millions of visitors a year, drawn to tasting rooms and vineyard tours built entirely around this same industrial process, just dressed up for a Saturday afternoon. A barrel room turned into an event space, a crush pad quiet in the off-season now hosting a wedding. Visit any of these regions on a weekend, and the industrial side stays almost entirely hidden. Visitors sip wine on a shaded patio, overlooking the same rows a mechanical harvester tore through months earlier, unaware that the building behind the tasting room houses a tank farm running at full capacity just a few months out of the year. That gap between the polished, unhurried experience out front and the round-the-clock industrial operation in back is by design. It's part of what the industry is selling, right alongside the wine itself. Even the glass matters. A single wine bottle isn't a trivial object. Multiply it by the number leaving American bottling lines every year, and the raw material required runs into staggering territory, most of it supplied domestically by glass container plants built specifically to keep pace with the industry's output. Each bottle is molded, cooled, inspected, and shipped to a winery long before it ever holds a drop of wine. Nothing here goes to waste either. What's left over after pressing, skins, seeds, pulp, collectively called pomace, doesn't just get thrown out. Seeds are pressed for oil used in cooking and cosmetics. Skins get composted and returned to the vineyard soil, feeding the same ground that grew them. Some wineries send pomace to facilities that convert it into biogas, powering equipment elsewhere on the property. Even the tartrate crystals pulled out during cold stabilization get sold off to the food industry as cream of tartar, showing up eventually in someone's kitchen cabinet. A system built to be this efficient rarely wastes anything twice. That efficiency extends to water and power too, and it has to. California's drought years have forced the industry's hand. Drip irrigation, delivering water directly to the roots instead of flooding a field, has become the default across most wine regions. Thin black lines snaking down every row instead of open furrows. Fermentation tanks need constant cooling. Cold stabilization rooms need serious refrigeration. Bottling lines run around the clock during peak season. It adds up to enough electricity demand that many of the state's largest wineries have turned to solar arrays on their own rooftops and open land just to keep the lights and the tanks running. Behind every stage of this is a workforce most consumers never think about. Vineyard crews pruning through winter, thinning leaves through the summer, then working the harvest itself. Lab technicians running sample after sample through the fermentation season, feeding data back to winemakers making real-time calls. University viticulture programs training the next generation of both. In a large winery's lab during harvest, that testing never really stops. New samples arriving from the crush pad and from tanks already fermenting, each one checked for sugar, acid, and a handful of other markers that tell the winemaking team whether everything is on track or needs a correction, sometimes within the hour. Mechanical harvesting has cut the number of hands needed in the field dramatically, but it hasn't eliminated the human judgment the process still depends on at every stage. Someone still has to decide when to pick, how long to age, what belongs in the final blend. The industry carrying all of this has been shrinking, even as its footprint keeps growing. American wine production has fallen substantially from its peak roughly a decade ago, as younger drinkers reach for hard seltzers and ready-to-drink cocktails instead. Smaller producers are getting absorbed into larger ones. Some Central Valley acreage has been pulled out and replanted to other crops entirely, as grape prices have softened, and yet the number of wineries operating across the country hasn't stopped climbing. The industry is leaning harder into premium wine, where the margins hold up even as everyday bottle sales soften. Export markets, particularly in Europe and Asia, have become another pressure valve, even though tariff disputes over the past several years have made that channel far less predictable than it once was. The full arc of this, from a handheld sugar reading in a vineyard at dawn to a case of wine loaded onto a truck 4 months later, never really stops moving. It runs on a biological clock no amount of steel and automation can override, the same relationship between sun, soil, and vine that's shaped winemaking for thousands of years. The machinery around that relationship has become extraordinary. The relationship itself hasn't changed at all. Every part of this system, from the harvester shaking vines at midnight to the technician checking a fermentation tank's temperature at 3 in the morning, exists to serve that one relationship as faithfully as possible. To take what the vine produced in a single growing season and carry it through months of transformation without losing what made it worth harvesting in the first place. That's the real engineering challenge underneath all the steel and automation. Not making wine faster, making it without losing the plant. So the next time you pull a cork or twist a cap, picture what's actually behind that bottle. The machine shaking vines loose at midnight, the crusher splitting skins open on the pad, the tank farm humming through the night, the bottling line running bottle after bottle under a blanket of gas. Most people only ever see the last inch of all of it. The glass, the pour, the label. Everything else runs quietly in the background, all year, whether anyone's watching or not. Somewhere tonight, while most people are asleep, another harvester is rolling down another row of vines, headlights cutting through the dark, the whole cycle starting over for next year's bottle. It will keep starting over, season after season, whether or not anyone ever thinks about it while they're pouring a glass. That's the part worth remembering. The industry behind the label never actually stops. If this look inside America's wine industry was worth your time, hit like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which part of the process surprised you most. We'll see you in the next one.